We'll start obviously with the bets that we've made, starting with that Chicago-Philadelphia game. We grabbed a decent position there on the 76ers -7 at the opener. That's sitting at -8.5 at the moment, so done a pretty good job there in the market. I don't think anything really needs to be said about that one. This is one of those games where for the Bulls, third game, 4 nights, they've had a day off in between, obviously, but you had that double OT game. You had that tough matchup with the Miami Heat. Traditionally, this is always where we've seen where things sort of come undone for a team from a fatigue standpoint. It's never really the game straight after a double OT, as we saw. Obviously, they went and won outright against Miami, but this is where the fatigue catches up a little bit. All those extra minutes logged really start to matter in a pretty meaningful way. So the Sixers here probably, like I said, should be able to roll at home. I think we've seen how much better Philadelphia's offense is, specifically their role players offensively at home this season. You know, they shoot almost 40% from deep, those role players at home, versus like 34% on the road. So if their offense is able to roll in a meaningful way, I think they're again just going to absolutely crush a Chicago team that still struggles drastically on the offensive end of the floor. Their adjusted offensive rating is bottom third in the league. They've been terrific defensively, but I don't think that's going to be what gets them over the line or keeps them competitive today. Like I said, when you look at the fact that they are going to be playing, I think, a little bit fatigued and struggling to match up, specifically, obviously, with Joel Embiid inside and the way that he's playing at the moment, not just as a scorer, but as a playmaker, and the pressure he's putting on defenses in those half-court sets. So in what projects to be a slower game with less possessions, it's going to suit Philadelphia drastically. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend grabbing an 8.5 now when we are on a -7, but at the same time, my number came out at between -9 and -9.5 in this one. So, you could make a slight argument that there's some slight value still to be had there. Probably wouldn't mind a Philadelphia team total over either. I think that they're going to score pretty convincingly in this one and comfortably throughout. So that's probably something else worth a look there, in my opinion. We are also on, this one is about as ugly as it gets, the Houston Rockets they're catching 11 now, +10 at home to the Golden State Warriors. That moved on the back of the news that Sengun and Green have been listed as questionable, which is really not great. I would have expected both of them to play in this game, just the way that Houston's going at the moment. I wouldn't say they're playing great basketball, but they're at least playing to some sort of identity, which they hadn't done for basically the entirety of the season up until this point. And the offense is clicking. And as long as the offense is clicking, the Warriors' defensive issues on the road are pretty well known. We don't need to highlight those. This is still a Golden State team that doesn't seem to be in sync on their travels. As good as they might be offensively and as easily as they might score, I don't think that there's a world where this team should be laying double digits against anyone in a situation where they have to travel. So for me, it's just an auto bet at this point. I wouldn't mind a Houston first half line as well. I might still bet that. I'm just going to sit and wait to see exactly what happens with the injury news for the Houston Rockets, to see who's in and out and what the best market entry point is there. But if Jalen Green specifically is good to go, I'd probably be inclined to play a Houston team total over as well. Like I said, they're executing pretty well on the offensive end of the floor, and against this Warriors defense that doesn't seem to show up ever. That sort of speaks for itself. So I don't love this position right now, but it's just something that we have to play, I think, for the rest of the season until we can get proven otherwise. My number came out closer to 7.5, 8, even with the rest disadvantage here. If I adjust for those two guys being out, I probably get close to market at the moment, but I wouldn't necessarily say we have too much of a negative EV position here either. The final bet we've made today, Sacramento Kings at the Utah Jazz, starting the fate of the Sacramento Kings. Grab the Jazz +6.5. Lauri Markkanen out, still 6.5. That market makes a little bit more sense to me now. The only reason I didn't go much larger on this yesterday at the opener was the fact that he was listed questionable, because it's fair to say this number is not even close to being right if he was in. With him out, I'm kind of between 5.5, 6. So I have no intention of buying out a position. If you want to buy out, go ahead and by all means. But this is still a pretty inflated number for what's still a difficult spot for Sacramento. Front end of a back-to-back in altitude. First game back on the West Coast time zone after spending a week on the East Coast. Again, they've shown up basically every single night, so you can't disregard them entirely. But that being said, I still think that you're absolutely paying a premium for a team that has been able to take advantage of some pretty nice things falling their way, which has happened again today because of the fact that Markkanen is out. Jordan Clarkson's out as well. I don't think he's particularly important to the spread or to this team. But again, they catch a team missing their star player. So, that strength of schedule isn't exactly going to change today. But I still think it's too many points for a Jazz team that has thrived at home as being an underdog, almost regardless of who's in or who's out. They are 9-1 against the spread this season as a home underdog. I think that this is still a situation where they're feisty enough. Full credit to that team for the way that they do show up every single night, it seems. But some of those matchups as well, I think Walker Kessler can do as good a job as anyone can do in slowing down what Sabonis does in the paint. It matches up very well, I think, for Sacramento's guards. It does put some pressure on Utah to have to perform offensively. But like I said earlier, Sacramento's defense is what it is. So, I mean, you can't exactly trust them to be getting too many stops either. And as a result, I think the Jazz are pretty live to still be, within a possession of this game in that fourth quarter and really make things interesting down the stretch of this one. So I'm still happy with my plus 6.5. Like I said, completely understand if you want to buy out of the 6.5 here on the back of the market and news, but that hasn't moved for a reason. Any higher, and you'd be inclined to probably add more to your position there, if anything. So those are the three bets that I've made so far for today's card. Just looking at the rest of the games, I don't think there's necessarily anything else that stands out in terms of what I had circled. I'm just going to pull up my spreadsheet as well as the games. But those are the only ones I think that really stood out in any way. The Knicks Timberwolves game is just so hard to properly, I think, price, given the fact that Minnesota is probably going to be without Anthony Edwards, who's still questionable. Rudy Gobert's questionable. I don't know what to make of it. Obviously, if those two go, then 8.5 is way, way too many points, but not anything that I'm necessarily running to bet. I kind of have some value on the Indiana Pacers Charlotte Hornets game going under that total. That's at 234.5 now. I have it 230, so a decent-ish edge there, but again, not one I necessarily want to be acting on. No Halliburton obviously slows down Indiana's offense in a pretty meaningful way. Charlotte's offense has absolutely stunk for the last month now. They've been a dead nut unders team for a little while, so the only way I would play that is unders. I have no real lean towards either side there. Memphis, Dallas, same things. Really hard to properly project. You've got Jaren Jackson questionable for Memphis. You've got Luka Doncic out, but Kyrie Irving questionable. Tim Hardaway Jr. also questionable for Dallas. If Kyrie's good to go, if Tim Hardaway Jr. is good to go, that plus 4.5, plus 5 in some places is way too many points. You have to play Dallas at that point, but the market will move pretty quickly, I think, on the back of those things, especially if Jaren Jackson Jr. is out. If we get Kyrie in and Triple J out, I think it's almost an auto Dallas team total overs play there. We saw how bad Memphis's defense was when he's not on the floor. His metrics are just absolutely off the chart good. The fact that he is no longer front runner for Defensive Player of the Year, I think, is absolutely criminal. But that's just the nature of these awards, where obviously media narratives mean far more than individual metrics, unfortunately. So for me, that's probably a game I'm still going to look at once we get more injury information, which we won't get, I don't think, until very close to tip off. But like I said, I would play anything up to over 115.5, maybe even a little bit higher if Kyrie Irving is good to go and if Jaren Jackson Jr. does sit this one out. But those are the other games today. And like I said, there's not necessarily a ton that stands out to me in terms of value. So I'm happy to roll with what we have. Hopefully we get some positive injury news from the Houston Rockets. And like I said, we might add some position there, maybe a first half plus 6.5 if Jalen Green is good to go, especially if Sengun is good to go as well. I'll probably be a little bit more aggressive with my position there.